Okay, I just want to welcome everyone to Senate Transportation. Just in case anyone's here for the speed limit on the speed limit on Winnipesaukee, that's actually being heard over in the State House, and that's House Bill 1424. We will be hearing House Bill 116, House Bill 435, and House Bill 571 today. So with that, I'll start the hearing on House Bill 116. Yep, and the prime sponsor, Representative Smith. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Representative Stephen Smith, Sullivan County District 11, Eckworth, Charlestown, Goshen, Langdon, Leominster, and Washington. House Bill 116 is about mobile delivery devices. The term that got tagged onto it, this was pizza robots, but they actually do a lot more than that. The largest industry input into the bill was actually from FedEx, and units are being developed right here in New Hampshire. So the idea of the bill was to get parameters around these things because, as I said, they're being developed now. As a matter of fact, we had a demonstration of one rolling around out in front of the State House when we were dealing with the bill over the summer. So setting up liability rules, where they go, how fast they go, how big they can be. And the bill was a retained bill that was initially a placeholder so that we could seek that industry input, make sure that we got the numbers right, and then went on the consent calendar in the House. There are other people here that are far more knowledgeable than I about the details, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Sherman?
Hi, Representative. Just a quick one. If I have questions about some of the technical aspects of the bill, who is best for me to ask?
What was the question?
Well, one of the questions is just technically how there's in line 9, there's it says the primarily designed to remain within 25 feet of the property owner. I'm just trying to get a sense of how that works. And then the other questions, one, there's I think a tiny typo on page 3. I'm sorry, line 3, page 2, the word A. And then how it says that they can go 20 miles an hour on a roadway, but it sounds like they're only limited to a crosswalk. So that's a pretty high speed for a crosswalk. And I was just wondering if that's something we should worry about, or just say, you know, that.
Yeah, I don't believe that limited only to crosswalks. There's an industry representative here. They can probably answer that more.
If you could just tell me who I should talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the idea of them being within a certain amount of the operator, they're not out there fully autonomous yet. So like, you're not going to deploy one from Nashua and it's going to go on its own throughout the entire city. One of the models that they discussed with us was for efficiency, a truck would park in a relatively central location and then to disperse them from the truck. The stage of the technology right now is that they do require a human operator to be there.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Really cool. I want one.
I do have a question. So just basically where it's sitting now, because it looks like section 2, the first page, line 12, where it says 259:75A. So the title of that is personal recognizance. Is the title of 259:75.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. As 75A, I'm presuming this would have a different title.
I will look those up. Maybe OLS did me wrong.
Well, that's just something I I just wanted to make sure.
Sure.
This is where it's supposed to be. So.
Okay.
All right, any other questions from the committee? Senator Ward.
Representative Smith, there are two different kinds. They're the industrial kind and the personal delivery. Can you take the personal delivery into the grocery store with you? And they will follow you slowly at less than 10 miles an hour?
Yes.
They will just fixed on you and the speed you're walking?
Yeah, you can do that right now. The tech company I work for even had drones that would follow you around all day. Little Skynet creepy for me, but, you know, they have it.
It would be creepy. Thank you.
Yeah, but those, they have to be in super close proximity, and then they're tagged to the person through a device. And they just trundle along behind you, like the cart that my aunt had, except the tag was her hand, and that's how she dragged things through Astoria and Queens to the supermarket.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Kate Hillary and Tom Presall, together? Okay,
That's okay with the chair.
absolutely.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Tom Presall with Demers and Presall, and I'm here today with Kate Calori with FedEx. I'll let Kate begin, and then I can get into some of the discussion that Senator Sherman brought up.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kate Calori, and I'm here representing FedEx. I'm the government affairs person for the New England states for FedEx Corporation based in Memphis, Tennessee. I'd like to first thank Deputy Speaker Smith for introducing the legislation, which is also passed in 15 other states across the country in recent years. FedEx is very excited to talk about House Bill 116 with regard to personal delivery devices. FedEx has worked with New Hampshire-based DECA and Dean Kamen to develop a same-day robot that we have named Roxo. The first test of Roxo happened just down the street in Manchester in DECA's backyard. And as a result of that, we went to the Manchester Board of Aldermen, Manchester, New Hampshire. And I'm happy to say that it all has gone well in Manchester. You may have seen Roxo going down Elm Street or other parts of Manchester doing some prototype delivery. In addition to Manchester, New Hampshire, Roxo has been demonstrated in Memphis, Tennessee, Plano, Texas, and Frisco, Texas. I'm happy to report that all of our testing has gone very well. We are hoping that with the passage of House Bill 116, we'll be able to see Roxo in other parts of New Hampshire. One of the reasons that Roxo was developed is to help deal with the rapid growth of e-commerce, the last mile delivery. Everybody wants their package now. So we're just coming up with the latest and greatest, and that's where Roxo came about. The purpose of the bot is to travel at moderate speeds on sidewalks and along roadsides with small shipments to deliver safely to customers' homes. As a result of the pandemic, we found that the development of Roxo was going to be very useful because that also reduces human contact while offering a very fast and efficient service. The global pandemic has propelled technologies like personal delivery devices to help supply chain businesses like FedEx. Some of the advantages and benefits of a personal delivery device like Roxo include, while it's not a vehicle, it has the ability to operate on both sidewalks and roads, enabling timely deliveries and the ability to select the best choice of routes. Roxo, as I mentioned, was developed with DECA, and it's based on Dean Kamen's The iBot wheelchair, and that wheelchair has had over 10 million hours of ever-free operation. Roxo's height also enables people to see him traveling down the sidewalk, whether they're walking along the sidewalk or in a car. Roxo is equipped with lights and communication screens for signaling stops and turns. Our personal delivery device is also zero emission and battery powered. Roxo's autonomous operations are remotely monitored at all times. If Roxo encounters a situation where it doesn't know how to proceed, it will stop and call for assistance. If necessary, a remote operator will navigate around the obstacle, and once clear, Roxo will resume autonomous navigation. Our current transportation operations follow the U.S. Code for Hazardous Materials. FedEx is fully supportive of this legislation as passed by the House of Representatives early in January. There are other companies that are supporting this, is Amazon as well, and we look forward to working with the committee. And I know we've mentioned in the past, this Deputy Speaker mentioned, we did have a presentation of Roxo earlier in the fall on the state capitol. We're happy to do that for this committee as well, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to expand a little bit upon the questions that Senator Sherman had asked. So there's two different devices we're talking about here. We've got a mobile carrier, which is what I believe Senator Ward was referring to, following you into the grocery store. The best way for me to understand what could be defined as a mobile carrier is for those of you who may be golfers and you've got the little remote control that has your bag follow you around the course while you're walking. Or there's things the size of a suitcase that, you walk and it's near you. The personal delivery device is what Roxo is. So it's a little bigger. It's designed to travel with you. So when the question you asked about the mobile carriers and being within 25 feet, that refers to the mobile carrier, not the personal delivery device.
Can you say that again, please?
The question asked about is designed to remain within 25 feet of the property owner. That's for the mobile carrier. Roxo is a personal delivery device, and you'll see there's separate distinctions throughout the legislation for the two. One other area is you asked about roadway. And so when we were working through the House, through their work sessions, as this bill was held for summer study, we came up with a definition of roadway, which you'll see on page 1, starting at line 19, which is for the purposes of this section. Roadway means a portion of a way improved, designed, or ordinarily used for vehicular travel, including the berm or shoulder. So that's where we came up with the term for roadway for Roxo. In addition, going through the House work session, we made the term roadway uniform throughout the bill. We set the speed limits as similar to what they are around the country in this legislation that has passed. So there's uniformity with these. And also there's language on page 2, starting on line 26, relative to the local authority's ability to deal with these machines. So with that, we're happy to answer any additional questions, but just wanted to give you a flavor, and we're happy to set up a demo anytime you'd like, weather permitting.
Any questions from Senator Waters?
So just to clarify, the personal delivery device can operate on a roadway, and the mobile carrier can, to the extent that it does need to get to a crosswalk.
That is my understanding of
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'll just say, I do think that the issue brought up about the section of law here, I think there's just something wrong there. My feeling it ought to be maybe under 259-56.
Sure, and again,
I mean, that's going to get worked out, because there's something screwy
yeah. So
about that,
so
the way that's placed.
when the deputy speaker introduced this legislation, that's when FedEx and Amazon we became aware, and I think that may have been done by OLS, but we're certainly happy to work with someone
we
to
gotta
put it in
fix
the
that.
right
So
section.
Take a look, because it may. I see some places that it might even go over into the personal assistance devices.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up with you, and we can work that out.
The only question I have is when you're dealing with it, when they're either on the sidewalk, which one goes on the sidewalk, the personal device carrier?
I believe they both
both do.
can, yeah.
What happens, have you used them in inclement weather, like when it's piled with snow?
So that was one of the reasons why Manchester, New Hampshire was picked, is everything's in prototype right now. Like we're passing it across the country, but they're not actually in full operation. So that's we picked New Hampshire to deal with snow and ice and rain. And as far as I've been told, everything is working smoothly. And again, there is someone that's constantly monitoring this with the personal delivery device. Right now, if you saw them on Manchester, there was an operator with them because everything's in a prototype.
Okay.
But when they start to go on their own, there won't be, but there will be somebody watching them at all times.
And again, I think it also is important to, remind you that these were designed off of the iBot wheelchair, which, is certainly designed for inclement weather.
Okay. Senator Sherman.
I just had a quick question. You'd mentioned the decreasing human contact, and I'm pretty confident you don't know the answer off the top of your head, but we know that pizza delivery people can be subject to even violence. Do you see this as being protective of FedEx workers in the future because it does decrease that human contact and the possibility of them being assaulted or having some other? Is that one of the benefits of this, or?
I'm going to answer your question. I don't know if I'm answering it exactly how you wanted to, so tell me if I'm not. When the personal delivery device comes to your home, there won't be a FedEx worker there. It'll just be the robot as itself.
Right.
So
Go ahead.
these are not designed to take away jobs from the workers. They're designed to help get packages fast to the consumer due to demand.
Could I just do a quick
Follow
follow-up?
up, yeah.
I actually, I have a lot of concern about workplace safety. And it would seem to me that this may actually be beneficial in decreasing the risk to somebody going to a door they don't know. And I was just wondering how much, you probably don't know this off the top of your head, but do you have incidents with your delivery people where they actually do run into difficult situations where they might be at risk? And this would, to me, it would seem to alleviate that. Is that?
I don't have that information off the top of my head, as you predicted. I could say this is, I think, the first time I've heard the question put in this way about safety of our delivery driver and the personal delivery device, but I'm happy to go back and see what we get at violence statistics.
Right. We just spent about 4 months working on healthcare workplace safety. And so it's sort of at the safety of your delivery people is important.
And
Right.
I do know that safety is a very important component at working at FedEx.
All right, okay, thanks.
I'm not going to ask if it'll dance for TikTok at the door. Okay.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak on House Bill 116 that was not given the opportunity? With that, I will close the hearing on 116, and we will not be execing this today. Yeah. And we also have the issue with the.
Got to figure out where to put this.
Yeah.
I can kind of understand why they did it there, because it meant they didn't have to renumber every single statute chapter after that, but it doesn't, there's another
Doesn't
place,
fit.
it should just all go in 256, I think. Where
that
half
was
of it goes in
repealed, wasn't it?
256, I think they'll put the whole thing in 256. I mean, in section 56, rather than section 75 or 7, But it'll get figured out.
All right, seeing it is 1:20, I will open the hearing on House Bill 435. This one we will not be, probably will not be executing, maybe not, but probably not. But I will ask that once this bill is done, if you can move out. So we've got 571 coming in behind, what?
Representative Sykes is not here.
Do you want to introduce the bill?
Yeah, when you're ready.
Okay. So Once this hearing is done, if, for those that are here for 571, you can stay. For those that are here for the 435, once the hearing is done, if you could leave so we can bring in more people for House Bill 571. With that, Senator
Yeah, thank you.
Waters.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senator Waters, District 4. I'm introducing House Bill 435, and this makes a rather simple change to the authority to suspend or revoke license by removing moral impairment and moral turpitude as basis for suspension or revocation of a license and leaving the current physical or mental impairment. So that is it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Waters. Do we have a sign-in sheet? Okay. Is there anyone that would like to speak on House Bill 435 but has not been given the opportunity? All right. I guess we'll end the hearing on House Bill 435.
You want executive?
You want to
I'll
move
move exec.
Okay.
I'll move on to pass on 435.
All right. All those in favor of ought to pass on House Bill 435 FN, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Consent.
Thank you.
Oh, that's because of the original bill. I don't think there's still a physical note on, or maybe there's to change the, I don't see it, but anyways, fine. Okay, no consent then. I bet you
Huh?
the F.
Yeah. Do you want to take it out?
Sure.
Senator Waters will take it out. Grant, question. The FN has really basically been taken off. Can this go on consent?
You can put bills on consent, I'm sorry. Grant Bossy with the New Hampshire Senate. Yes, you can put a bill on consent with an FN, and then if you think that there's no FN for finance to consider, you can suggest to the chair of finance that he not take it.
Perfect.
And I'll be meeting with them to go over the FN report, so if you'd like to relay such a request, I will do so.
I'll move consent.
I'll second. Okay. Senator Water moves consent. Senator Sherman seconds. All those in favor of 435 on consent, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. And Senator Waters.
I guess you consider me an expert on moral impairment. Oh, okay, all right, turpitude. Yeah. I bet there's an interesting history behind that getting in statute in the first place. I bet you there is.
No, I think do you want to go into exec? Because I think the few bills we have might be a little, we may not agree. It may last longer than 15 minutes.
Just a suggestion.
How many people do we have signed up for 517?
You're mostly through the third sheet, not all of them are speaking. So a lot.
All right, so I will end the hearing on House Bill 435. Yes. You move out.
Senator, you're about 10 minutes ahead of the scheduled time, so if you want to exec for 10 more minutes, you could. You could take a recess.
Well, why don't we try executing a couple of bills? Well, we're not going to be able to do 311 because apparently there's an issue with,
Turn on your mic, please. Thank you.
thank you. We can't do 311 because it looks like there's an issue with the amendment that we're going to have to fix. But just to give you an update on what I've done, what I thought we would do is do a pilot program for just 2 years for the healthcare industry and for the auto dealers.
Can we do a committee amendment?
We could.
Why don't we just do it? I mean, I saw the amendment you gave us, and it's fine. If there just needs to be tweaked, we could do it with the committee.
Are you okay with that, Dan? Tweak. Tweaking, go ahead and do a committee amendment to kind of take care of the issues that, or are there too many issues? Why don't you have a seat?
Good afternoon, committee members. Dan Bennett, New Hampshire Automobile Dealers Association. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm certainly not playing games on my phone. I'm getting to the analysis that we had done. So a few of the problems that we identified, and I don't see in the amendment where the 2-year pilot component is. What I do see in paragraph 6, information is problematic. It says that dealers can't share the information on the ID with to another person or entity. So the reason that you take a copy of a driver's license is to provide it to a financial institution so that you can then allow lending. So the fact that they take the information and then not being allowed to share it appears to be a bit problematic. And then the other part that we identified, and we did just see it this morning, so this is a very rough analysis. We just saw it. The paragraph 2 deals with consequences. The purpose for the dealers is to prevent the theft of vehicle and identity theft. If the customer client declines to give consent, and then the dealer is forced to allow them to test drive the car, the purpose is to, if you're not willing to share your information so that we can protect it, if the customer says, no, I'm not going to give you my driver's license, I then still have to say, okay, well, you're still allowed to go drive the car. And then the sharing of information, say that they did allow that and the vehicle was in fact stolen, you then actually wouldn't be able to share that information with law enforcement, right? Because you're, so, sorry to cause a problem, but there were just some things that we noticed very quickly with a quick analysis that we saw as problematic. So if there's time to fix it, we would gladly and welcome the opportunity to work on it a little bit further.
Well, the question I have, I thought the whole idea behind allowing the auto dealers to be able to have a copy of the driver's license is just for driving, to test drive the vehicle. I was not aware that you were going to transfer that information when and if someone sells the car or purchases the car.
Yes, and thank you for the question. In some instances, it is for simply for the dealer's protection for that test drive of a vehicle. But when we look at the big picture of the operations that occur on a daily basis at dealerships, lenders, financial institutions require proof of identity, and the dealer is really the dealer is at the front end. The credit union is in the middle, and so they're simply obtaining that identification, passing it on to the credit union, who is or bank or lender, who is going through the red flags rule, identity theft type stuff, and then deciding whether that person is who say that they are, and they're willing to loan them X amount of dollars.
What are you doing now? All righty then.
This is a practice that occurs in most all retail industries, not just the automobile lending. Any industry where there's financing, it requires such a practice.
So I mean, obviously, I don't think we should do it on the fly today, but I do think that we can word this where if, in fact, someone wants to purchase that vehicle, then that information can be sent to the lender. Senator Sherman?
I'm just thinking that given what we understand, I think a pilot, at least for a component of this, is not going to be very helpful. We need something that you can work with long-term but still protects the consumer, as opposed to, if some of this, just, if it's already in practice and we're not seeing problems with it, I think the key is going to be the consent. The consent on the part of the person who is giving their driver's license. That, to me, is going to be the most important part, because if it's something that's absolutely necessary for financial organizations and others, or for the police, that's pretty important, then the two questions that I have, the one requirement I would put in here is consent, but then the question is, what do we do if they don't want to consent? I think the business should be allowed to say, well, I'm sorry, I need this, and if you can't consent to it, then you can't test drive my car, so.
And we would wholeheartedly agree with that. That would be the business's choice and practice, but it appears from that section that there's no consequence to the holder who declines to provide such consent, that we
The
would
consequence is what,
not be
is
able.
that they can't take the car for a drive. They, you can't apply, they can apply for their own financial support for the car if they want to, but if you can't provide the identification, if they won't let you, then of course you can't do that.
And this is what, there's no consequence to the holder who declines.
No, I'm
such-
agreeing with you,
So
Dan,
I think
so
that part is problematic. And then to the other part too, about the consent, it's our opinion that it should be meaningful consent. I don't know if anyone's refinanced or closed their home lately, right? But the stack of papers like that, I don't know if you've done an automobile deal, there's a lot of paperwork. And so that consent or that form that's envisioned, it needs to be meaningful and impactful at the same time too, we would.
Well, again, I don't think we're ready, this is ready for prime time. I do think a pilot program would be good, but I think we need to iron out some of the language.
I guess, from what I've heard and intuited, that if there is an ongoing practice now, which is potentially not allowed under statute, I think maybe we better try to pass a bill now that lets that practice continue. Because if right now the image, the license information is being given to the potential creditor, and that's not allowed, then we're in a little bit of a conundrum.
Why don't we work on it after
Yeah,
517? It's a little quieter. Okay.
But thanks.
Okay, thank you all for your time.
All right, move out of exec. Okay. Senator
Yeah.
Ward moves out of exec. Senator Sherman seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are finished with House Bill 311 and 435, so if any of you are here for that bill, we will not be execing either of the other bills that we have today. So if you're here for that, then you can leave, and we'll use this time for 571 as they're coming in. How many people do we have?
There's also a third sheet.
17? No. Oh, yeah.
And the prime sponsor is here.
Well, we're in recess. We're in recess until 1:40.
I'm going to have to leave by 3:30, by the way.
Madam Chair, I'd suggest if you want to announce two witnesses at a time, then we can say the next name during the hall, they'll have time to come in. You want to also
Doesn't look like we had any state reps except for the sponsor, so I'm just gonna go in order.
Madam Chair, that clock's a little slow, so anytime you're ready.
Yep. All right, I'm going to start the hearing on House Bill 571. And I will ask, we have a lot of speakers, so I am going to ask the speakers to try and limit themselves to 3 minutes, so we can make sure everyone gets a say. And I'll call the first speaker, who's the prime sponsor, and then after that, we'll start calling 2 people at a time, so they know who's coming next. So with that, Representative, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Madam Chair. Senators, for the record, my name is Tom Walsh. I'm a representative from Merrimack County District 24, which is the town of Hooksett. I am thankful to have the opportunity to introduce House Bill 571. This bill simply repeals the prohibition of OHRV use on Hoyt Road, Marsh, which was inserted into the back of HB2 in 2019. Unlike most bills or parts of bills added to HB2, and we all know how it works, behind the enabling language, this prohibition never had a bill number. It never was assigned to a committee. It never had a public hearing. And the people that this prohibition affects never had an opportunity to defend themselves or say, wait a minute, that is just not true. The process was non-existent and unfair, and that's why I filed the bill, to correct that wrong. It really is that simple. I was going to get into the details in my introduction. I was on page 4 of my draft last night at midnight, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. The people behind me, the ones that have signed up to speak on this bill, are the ones that this prohibition affects. They're here for their hearing. And actually, that's something that they were denied before. They can do a much better job than I talking about the history, the chronology, and rebutting some of the recent claims that are supposed to harm the marsh somehow and other issues that have come up. Keep in mind the original issue, and this whole thing started working when a few neighbors just didn't really like the riders there. This has morphed into more in terms of arguments on why the prohibition should stay regardless of how it came to be. So I'm confident that when you hear the details, your eyebrows will rise as mine did. And I truly hope that you read all the information that's provided to you and support an ought to pass and move this forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions from the committee?
Thank you again.
Thank you. And I am corrected. There are actually two representatives here. Representative Suzanne Smith. I apologize.
No problem. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Suzanne Smith. I represent the towns of Plymouth, Hebron, and Holderness, Grafton County, District 8. And today I'm here representing the minority of the Resources Committee in the House, who definitely oppose repealing the ban on the prohibition of OHRVs on Hoyt Road, Marsh. Since the winter of 2019-2020, riding modified dirt bikes and other OHRVs on the frozen Hoyt Road Marsh has been prohibited. The prohibition came about after increased use led to many complaints to the city of Concord, because Hoyt Road Marsh is in a rural area of Concord. Numerous complaints about noise, traffic, trash on the side of the road, cars parked blocking traffic almost. The city could not do anything about this because they tried to pass an ordinance and were turned down because obviously Hoyt Road Marsh is more than 10 acres and is under state jurisdiction. So by this time it was too late to file legislation, and the prohibition was added to House Bill 2 in 2019. So during public testimony in the Resources Committee, which we've heard both in 2019 and 2020, we heard about dozens of loud dirt bikes with studded tires driven by teens and preteens racing around on a cleared area of ice, sometimes at speeds in excess of 50 to 60 miles an hour. We were told about hazardous parking conditions, a small lot, trailers parked along Hoyt Road Marsh, no bathroom facilities, and at the end of the weekend, trash left to be picked up by the neighbors. Unfortunately, what started as a fun activity 20 or 30 years ago has now increased as with the popularity of OHRVs, so that it has become an unruly situation. There are alternatives. Turtletown Pond, which is just a couple of miles from the marsh, does allow ice riding, and there are a few other ponds or lakes in the lakes region within a half-hour drive of Hoyt Road Marsh, where people may go and ride motorcycles and even cars on the ice. So in closing, Hoyt Road is narrow. Parking used to access the marsh is very limited. Visualize 5 or 10 vehicles pulling trailers for their motorcycles, as well as cars of people who come along to spectate. They're crammed into the small lot or along the road. Add to that, no facilities, no porta potties, no trash receptacles. So since the ban was put into place, I've had the opportunity to go out there in the winter and talk with ice fishermen who are carrying their gear out and their buckets and augering holes down to do their fishing, and skaters and ice and cross-country skiers. And they're all very happy to be there, and there are no more issues with noise. Since there are other opportunities for people, and because the activity has grown so much that it is unruly, I hope that you will support voting ITL on this and allow this repeal not to happen. Thank you. And I can take questions if you have any.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Senator Waters?
Thank you. Just to clarify, so in Turtletown Pond, they can go up to 55 miles an hour.
Yes.
And that's all, it's allowed there. And then to clarify too, you mentioned a hearing on the issues at Hoyt. Now, was that on the House Bill 2 amendment, or was it on a separate bill?
That was on a separate bill. In 2000, actually it was early 2020, because it was right before we were shut down. An amendment was brought in to repeal the prohibition, and we had dozens and dozens of people testifying on both sides. The committee interim studied the bill, and then it came back again in 2021, and we retained it, and now here you have it.
So just to clarify then, there may not have been a hearing on language that is included in HB2, but there was certainly a full public hearing on
As-
the previous repeal bill.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions? Senator Ward?
Thank you, Representative Smith. Has anybody done any decibel level testing to find out exactly how much the noise is?
I know we have heard from both sides that the decibel levels are not that high, and then that they are that high, and probably Captain Eastman could answer that, because Fish and Game does have meters to measure the decibels.
So what you're saying is that they have done some measurements, you just don't have the,
I just do not have that information. I would assume that has been done.
okay, thank you.
Senator Rishardi?
Thank you, Representative Smith. I just want to be clear, the nearby pond that you mentioned, or any other locations, are residents impacted, or is it free and clear of residents?
I do not know. I just know that in statute, Turtletown Pond has the speed limit of 55 miles an hour on the ice, and no one has tried to, as far as I know, stop that from happening.
Follow-up? Thank you. I just want to be clear, because you don't want to, take a problem and move the problem without solving the issue
Right.
at hand.
It's been since the winter of 2019, 2020, so it's been 2, I think, going on 3 years, that there has not been ice riding on Hoyt Road Marsh. And I have not heard any, I haven't not read any newspaper reports about the other ponds and lakes. So I don't know for sure.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Representative Ronzullo, welcome.
Excuse me. Oh, got to get that off. Thank you. I'm Andy Ronzullo. I represent towns of Hudson and Pelham. I am also the chair of the Resources, Recreation, and Development Committee. And now you've heard the minority report. Now you'll hear the majority report on House Bill 571. First of all, lakes over 10 acres, the water, whether it's liquid or ice, is held in trust by the state for the benefit of all the people. That means you, me, every resident who does not own land on a lake has the same right to recreate on those lakes, in whether winter or summer, as someone who does own land bordering said lake. This bill repeals the prohibition, which became law in 2019, against OHRV, off-highway recreational vehicles, traveling on Hoyt Road, Marsh, which is a lake that exceeds the 10 acres. It's in the city of Concord. Prior to the ban, there was contention between local residents and some riders. During this session's hearing, before the House Resources, Recreation, and Development Committee, the local residents complained of the noise and environmental effects that they asserted happened prior to the ban. The riders testified that they were on a large pond surrounded by trees and were recreating legally on public ice. They testified they were never disrespectful to the residents and took care to avoid conflicts. The residents disagreed. But what we had here was one group's word versus another group's word. Obviously, the ban was instituted prior to the filing of this bill, so there was no way to verify the testimony of either side. A site visit would have been great, but there was no way to make a site visit to see anything because the activity had been banned. The ban became statute as part of the House Bill 2 amendment process, so there were no records of what a hearing actually found. However, the majority of the committee, of the House Resources, Recreation, and Development Committee, still had sufficient credible evidence from a reputable source to reach a decision to reverse the ban. The pond and much of its environs is under control of the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. They had processed some complaints from abutters prior to the ban and came down on the side of the riders. They also testified that no outright bans like this exist in the state, except for this one passed in 2019. All this bill does is press the reset button. It returns everybody to their original positions. Should there be another bill to reinstate the prohibition, this bill would have allowed all the people the right to be heard by their representatives and senators, and the process will be the same for all the people. That's all I have to say.
Thank you,
Any
Representative.
questions?
Any questions from the committee? Senator Sherman.
Hi, welcome to the committee, and it's nice to see a fellow LCHIP member here.
Yep, whenever we meet.
Right, whenever we meet. So, we have a ban on personal watercraft in the Hampton Seabrook estuary. That's liquid, it's not frozen. And the reason for that ban is mostly environmental. So even though it's a public waterway or a public body, we do have precedent for banning access for specific reasons. Maybe not using OHRVs on ice, but we do have that. We have a bar that we look at, and that ban might change as technology changes and understanding of environmental impact. So my question, I'll ask Fish and Game the same question. Have you done a formal environmental impact study of reintroduction of OHRVs on the marsh? I assume it's a fairly fragile watershed. Impact on aquatic species, impact on birds, and that kind of thing.
We didn't do anything of that sort because there was nothing for us to look at as far as why the ban occurred. The ban occurred because people were complaining about noise and impacts. So what would have been the appropriate thing would have been for the committee to have a site visit to see whether in fact that was what was happening. The way this became law negated all that. We couldn't do it.
Follow up? Quickly. So I completely agree with you that it would have been helpful to do a site visit while the practice was in place. But do you not agree that now that it has not been in place for 2 to 3 years, before we repeal this, would it make sense to do an assessment of the environmental impact of reintroducing that?
Not necessarily, because that, like I say, that was not the reason for this ban to occur. I mean, if I could say, yes, it'd be good to do it if all people were back in the positions that they had prior to this ban occurring. Because let's face it, we're the representatives of the people, and we need to have all of the people get their rights, all of their rights. And I don't think that occurred in this. So what I'm looking for is simply to get back to square one and then make a decision.
Senator Waters.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for testimony. So We do regulate now an OHRV operation on frozen surfaces if there's fish shanties, right? You can't operate within 150 feet of a fish shanty at all, and,
Yep.
without obeying the speed limits that are in, I don't know, what is it, 215 A6 or whatever. something like that.
I'm
So
certain the
that-
captain behind me will be able to.
In terms of that, I mean, that is the case. that
Oh,
we-
yes.
We
Oh,
do
absolutely.
regulate, I mean, they're public waters, yes, but we do
Right.
regulate them for a
Absolutely.
variety of reasons. So I guess that if the neighbors, if they want to put fish shanties out there every 150 feet, that would be a different situation.
That is possible.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Oh, sorry. Senator Ricciardi.
Hello, thank you for your testimony. In the video hearing, February, I think 10th of 2021, Captain Eastman had testified that there are restrictions in place on other bodies of water for these type of winter sports and activities. Would there be a way to get a list, an inventory of this?
I would say maybe ask Captain Eastman who's behind me. There's probably, I would guess, but I won't answer for him.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Representative. Representative Bartlett, welcome.
I do have written.
We have to hand out our own in the house.
What? Fish and Game.
All set? Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Senate Transportation Committee. I am Representative Christy Bartlett, and I represent Merrimack District 19, East Concord. I live within a mile of the Hoyt Road Marsh, and I'm here to oppose the effort to repeal the ban on OHRVs, including motorcycles, operating on the ice. I've heard from many constituents over the past 3 years, and before that, but 3 years since we've been talking about these bills. I lived in Loudon for 14 years and in Concord for the last 37 years. Hoyt Road Marsh is shallow, as is any marsh, and it freezes much earlier than many of the ponds in the area. So it's usually frozen between December and March. That's a pretty long season. The past couple of winters have been peaceful and allowed those of us who are able to enjoy the marsh and all its pleasures. This was not the case in the past, however, when the HRVs and motorcycles had access to the ice. The noise was so great that there was no bird watching. There was no snowshoeing or cross-country skiing. There was no ice skating or ice fishing and hiking to enjoy when these vehicles were present. I have to believe that even in their absence, the wildlife was affected. I'll try to paint a picture for you, as we know we cannot offer visuals in testimony. Hoyt Road is a narrow, two-lane road with no shoulder, and particularly narrow when there are snowbanks on each side. It's also a school bus route. The Merrimack Valley School District and Concord School District use Hoyt Road with the school buses. There is a small dirt parking lot that can accommodate about 6 vehicles. This was usually not adequate for the trailers that are needed to bring in some of the OHRVs and off-road motorcycles. With vehicles parked along the roadway, there is not enough room for 2 vehicles to pass at the same time in a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. There are no porta potties, so I'll leave that issue alone. The use of the marsh was not limited to occasional use in the past. Even Christmas morning, there were motorcycles out on the ice. Sometimes at night, trucks would be parked on the ice, shining headlights on the racing circle so riders could see. In addition, these off-road bikes are not required to have mufflers. So even when there are only a few out there, the noise can be very loud. Now imagine residents who live close by trying to not only enjoy the marsh, but even noise in their own homes that could be significant. I live almost a mile away. And when there was racing or even just motorcycles being used and not racing, we could hear them at our home. I do understand that these activities are fun, and for those who own HRVs and motorcycles. They've found another area in Loudon for the past couple of years. I would suggest the bill is not necessary and allow those of us who would want to use a motorized vehicle to enjoy who do not want to use a motorized vehicle to enjoy the marsh to continue to do so peacefully. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions from Senator Sherman?
Quick question. You described this road as a two-lane road. When there are people parked, are they parked on both sides of the road?
They were. It depended on how many people were there, but they had to find room, and usually there was only room for one vehicle to get through safely.
So that's my question.
There's no shoulders.
Is there, and I'll ask Officer Eastman this as well, but is there availability, or can you get an emergency vehicle through there when they're parked on both sides?
I mean, you could get an emergency vehicle, but only one, so they have to be going in the same
But
direction.
there is enough room for them to move?
Yeah, there'd be enough room for one vehicle to get through.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Representative.
Thanks for your time.
Captain Eastman, welcome.
Madam Chairwoman and the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I did not intend to testify because I believe, as Representative Walsh said, that those folks that are more passionate than I will give you a better representation. But I felt that, as the day went on, that I should speak a little bit about the enforcement efforts that went on prior to this repeal. And unfortunately, I apologize that this I did not uncover this document that I'm going to pass around to you folks until after the committee, the House committee, had basically made their decision. But I think that this document is pretty representative of what we found in 2016. This document. One of my predecessors, Major Wimsat, who is now retired, and from the district lieutenant that covered that area, Lieutenant Scott Lacrosse, and he is also retired, and about 9 months after retiring, tragically passed away. So, unfortunately, I cannot have them here to testify to that. Major Wimsat is in Japan right now doing some retirement work. So, I think that this document, though, speaks for itself. And what this document really hits on is that we had received noise complaints, and those noise complaints, and that's what it was. There were no environmental impacts or complaints of any other illegalities or potential impacts other than noise. So what we did was in the months of January and February, we went to Hoyt Road Marsh and checked on the marsh, periodically in lieu of complaints, and this document basically is what those officers had documented at those times that they were there. So I can certainly pass that around. I did make 20 copies, so that I think there's more than enough for everybody. But I also wanted to reiterate that there seemed to become some misconception that the Fish and Game Commission was not in favor of this repeal, but that is not the case. A year ago, when this came in front of the House originally, they were in favor of the repeal on Hoyt Road Marsh, and they reconfirmed this about a week ago at their commission meeting as well, that they were in favor of this repeal. So I certainly can answer any questions, but really what I wanted to speak to is that we did go to Hoyt Road Marsh. We did not go there for environmental impacts. We went there for noise complaints, and we took basically enforcement action on what we found. And from this document, there were bikes there, but we did not find any violations.
Thank you. Senator Waters.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So the previous testimony seemed to indicate that there was no requirement for off-road bikes to have sound muffling, and that's not true, isn't it?
That is not true.
Yeah, I
I'm sorry,
thought so.
that's your question. That's not
250 and
true.
A12 applies here, right?
So bikes on operating anywhere off their own property would be required to have a registration, a spark arrestor on the engine, which also would muffle noise and protect it from exploding, and a exhaust that spoke to the manufacturer's specification, which would be 96 decibels. There's also laws that there cannot be any closed competition course exhaust used on trails or on any public bodies of water as well. So they are required to have exhaust, and we did not find any violations of that in this time frame.
So if I could just follow up on that. So by the report here, I mean, it is brief, of course, no violations were observed. So from that report, we can confirm that no officer has ever seen an aftermarket muffler adjustment on any one of these vehicles?
All I can speak to is this time frame and looking back at any enforcement actions that were taken, across the state. And I did not find any on Hoyt Road, Marsh, where they found any illegalities at that location.
And just one more, so to confirm, if you see an aftermarket exhaust device, that is a violation and you enforce it?
As long as it doesn't meet, if it's an aftermarket exhaust has a greater decibel level than 96, then that would be illegal. If there was an aftermarket exhaust, and there are many manufacturers out there that do meet the 96 decibels, so I cannot say that they didn't come across an aftermarket exhaust. What I can say is that they did not come across one that they felt was 96.
If I just may clarify, so if they see one, they test the decibel level?
No. Decibel testing is problematic. You have to have the right environment. We have tried for years to, we're adhered to the 96 decibels, and it's very hard to go out. It's not like pulling out a meter and saying, okay, that one's 96, that one's 100. You have to do certain things and have meters on the machine, and a lot of these don't have tachometers on them to show what RPMs. Very, very difficult to do that.
So, just if I may follow up, is it, since we have so much contrary opinion about what is noisy or not noisy, it does seem that we really can't indicate that, because if you see a device on a vehicle and it's not being tested for decibels, then in a sense we're not enforcing that statute about noise violation. Fair enough?
What I can say is that how we've dealt with this in the past, and would be that if I'm out on the trail, let's say, and I have the same machine come by me all day long, and this happens a lot with snow machines, and there is a law that speaks to the 96 decibels, and there's also a law that speaks to aftermarket exhausts. And what I can say is that, and this might not be the greatest analogy, but it's almost like listening to jazz music all day long, and then right in the middle you put some death metal music in there. It's pretty easy to pick out which one is the aftermarket exhaust, and then with some questioning, you open up, and sure enough, there's an aftermarket exhaust in the snow machine. So what I can say is that if my officers went out to the pond and there was 5 dirt bikes going around in a circle, they could say, okay, one of those has an issue because it sounds a lot louder than the 5 other Yamahas that are going around in a circle.
Can they write up a violation if they haven't tested it?
Yes, they can.
Thanks. Thank you.
Senator Sherman.
I think one of the roles, if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, of Fish and Game is to be sort of the state steward of our environment as well as allowing and ensuring public access. And I'm on Parks Council, and I understand their mission is public access and to promote recreation. Has any formal environmental impact been looked at, or has there been a study to determine what the impact of reintroducing the accessibility for bikes in that area? Sounds like it's a fairly, I'm actually going to go out there and take a look, but it sounds like it's a fairly fragile environment, but maybe not. And has there been any Fish and Game study of this?
So to answer your question, there has not been, certainly there's been some site visits from our wildlife division or non-game to the wildlife management unit that is there, the Hoyt Road Marsh unit. So Hoyt Road Marsh itself is a artificial impoundment that was created in the 70s through some grants, some federal grants for waterfowl habitat. So we haven't done any, so we've done site visits. That's really kind of the history of what it was more of a place for ducks to propagate than anything else. But we haven't done those studies, to look at dirt bikes because this was a noise issue and not an environmental issue. And in my looking at environmental impacts on in that area, the real environmental impacts that I've seen came from Hoyt Road itself, because we've been called there for deer strikes and things of that nature. So to me, it's not a fragile environment. I think it's the noise issue.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Shardy.
Thank you, Captain Eastman. So I made some notes from observing the hearing, and no data was provided in the House hearing for scientific data to demonstrate that the affected ponds, and specifically Hoyt Road Marsh, will be protected from harm by the motorized vehicles. So were there any considerations for the parking, the trash, leaking fuels, or any damage to the wetlands, water quality, habitat, or frequency of wintertime wildlife? And I wanted to know, did the Wetlands Division of the Department of Environmental Services review the risks to this bill? And was there any scientific investigation by the department done?
To my knowledge, other than a site visit, there has not been any environmental study done. I cannot speak to Department of Environmental Services, but what I can say is that could be said for any body of water in the state of New Hampshire. Certainly during my career and having covered the southern part of Lake Winnipesaukee, where we had many fishermen and OHRV users and people camping during the Derby on the side, on the sides of the Guilford Beach and things of that nature. There's certainly, like I said, that could be a statewide question. But to answer your question, no, we did not do any studies like that. As far as trash, I can say that I drove by yesterday, and we're in 2022. The riders have not been there for a couple of years, and there was a mattress and box spring thrown in one of the parking areas for the wildlife management area. So I think it's a little hard to say who was actually depositing trash there. And if my officers saw somebody depositing trash there, they certainly would have spoken to that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at this document you gave us. This data is 6 years old. I'm looking at number 52, which I'm assuming is the code for one of the officers. Checking the marsh, and there was not any bike activity. Would it be possible that during that time the ice was not good enough for bikes?
I don't have any data on what the weather was like that year. What I can say is that there's certainly times on this list where there was bike activity. So throughout we see bike activity in January 8th and 9th. It is certainly possible we went through a warm spell, but then we see more usage in February 27th. So I would say from that there was enough ice there. There certainly could have been an event like we've had the last 2 weeks of this winter where maybe it warmed up and they didn't choose to ride there. But this really speaks to the enforcement effort. I didn't bring it to speak to, the environmental or weather issue of that year.
Follow up? I'm just thinking that you had 20 bikes on the 9th, and then all of a sudden there is no activity. So it seems to me there might have been some weather event that made it really not very good to go on the ice and race.
I would say, that's certainly a possibility. I can speak, so in my old patrol, there were 2 places where bikes raced and throughout my career. And that was, one was in Northfield and one was in Guilford, right by the Laconia Airport. And although I don't drive by there every day now that I'm in this position and in Concord most days, I can say that on the weekends, Lily Pond and Guilford, there are generally early on, it's another place where it ices up early, and they are operating there. And I can say there was at least 2 to 4 bikes on a Saturday that operated there. And then we got some snow, they plowed an area, but then it seemed to be like they went off and did something else or maybe went someplace else. So I can't really speak to what happened here, but what I can speak to is that it seems to kind of fluctuate. It's obviously life kind of gets in the way. That's all I can kind of give for my impression of how ice riders operate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one question, dovetailing on what Senator Ward said, but where Major Wimsatt said, listed below are the dates District 5 officers have visited Hoyt Marsh to address noise complaints. So it would seem to me that if there were noise complaints, then that would mean that there probably were people near or on the marsh. Wouldn't you say?
I'm sorry, I'm confused with on or near the marsh.
Well, Major Wimsatt says, listed below are the dates District 5 officers had visited Hoyt Marsh to address noise complaints concerning the use of motorcycles equipped to run on the ice. And those days that February 12th, checked the marsh and there was not any bike activity. So there were noise complaints, but there was no bike activity. So I would presume that if there were noise complaints, there were some activity going on, but just maybe not by the time they got there.
My impression of this document is that it was obviously this was a issue that was going on for some time, that we were getting complaints, Concord Police Department was getting complaints about noise issues. And we were going there and checking, certainly some of these days maybe there were complaints, but this was more of we went there and checked, at times where, not necessarily it was a complaint, but that, we were there to check to make sure that, kind of being proactive about complaints, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No. Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I know this is the Senate and not the House, but one of the traditions in the House was the sponsor, any reps, active reps, or any former reps or senators were invited to speak first. I wonder if I could entertain that at this level at the Senate.
Sure.
Only because I was part of the bill that started in you were a lieutenant, I think, when we were working together,
Well,
weren't you?
there are also people in front of you, so come on up.
I'm saying, I'll defer to any active rep or former rep. I just still
Come
carry
on
the
up.
title of honorable, I hope,
Come on up.
and hopefully enlightening. Thank you, Madam Chair. And other members of the committee. For the record, Jack Flanagan, former Hillsborough County 26. In actually other terms also, I don't know if it was 26 back then, it might have been a different number. Just some history. This whole bill came about, the city of Concord hired a new business development coordinator. She came from, I believe it was Pittsburgh, but it could have been somewhere in Pennsylvania. And she bought the home on or near Hoyt Pond during the summer. She had no idea that they were been riding on Hoyt Pond for over 4 decades. 40 years of riding on that pond. And there's been, I can say, relatively no events. And I'm sure there'll be other people that ride or have been associated with riding for the 40 years on that body of water. Well, this woman, when she found out that there were riders there, went to the mayor of Concord. And then the mayor of Concord proceeded to contact the senator that represented Concord, and he happened to be the majority leader at the time. And at that time, I had a bill to enlarge Ride the Wilds. I don't know if you folks know what Ride the Wilds is, but it's up in Coos County. It's been a huge success for the North Country, and I've been working with a number of people trying to expand some of the trails. And then Tom LeVake, who I think is one of the gentlemen that wants to speak, came to me and told me about the banning of the OHRVs on this body of water. So I put in an amendment to my bill. It was a Germain Amendment because it dealt with OHRVs, but as Representative Smith testified, it really went nowhere because they wanted to deal with the bill at hand, which was the right to ride the wilds bill. But I believe there was no one on the committee.
Can we have some quiet in the back, please?
Thank you. I know from speaking to a number of the members of the committee that no one liked the way this thing progressed. There was, absolutely no debate. There was no public hearing, and it was really at the forefront of a lot of the debate. There's been a lot of discussion about environmental impact. Well, they're riding on ice. There's no erosion issues because there's ice. There's a minimal of vegetation because if it's under the water, it's under the ice. And they're not riding on the edge of the water because if you're on the edge of the ice gets thin and no one wants to go pull their motorcycles or snowmobiles out of the water. And you actually see it now where people are driving on Winnipesaukee or whatever and finding their cars going into the water because it's shallow near the edge. So as far as the environmental impacts is concerned, they've been doing it for 40 years. I'm going to find it somewhat, I don't know, I've got to pick the right word, but it's somewhat questionable of any environmental impact of motorcycles riding on ice. Okay? And they do maintain the ice because they don't want a rough surface too, and they clean it and so on and so forth. You'll be surprised on how environmentally sensitive these people are because they know there are people that want to skate. There's also snowmobilers and things like that. So just, I sort of cringe on these environmental impact because there's no animals involved, there's no vegetation involved. They're just riding on a chunk of ice. And as far as pollution is concerned, the majority of them are what they call 4-stroke engines versus a 2-stroke engine. The 2-stroke engine sounds like a can of bees, when you shake them up, with a 4-stroke sounds just like a regular automobile. But the modern motorcycles that are out there have very high-tech components like titanium valves and springs, magnesium cases. So the tolerance is there, so pollution is minimized. And one of the things is at the United States or the national level, they pushed for getting the 2-stroke engines out and replacing them with the 4-strokes. So we've got 40 years of basically using the same property, and what really tipped the apple cart was this one person who was from a different area of the country, had no idea when they bought the home that this activity has been going on for 40 years. Okay? So I put in the amendment. It didn't get very far, which was discouraging. But again, it's obviously got legs because it's still here in front of us. I think the big thing we need to understand is, what's the precedent we're dealing with? And I overheard the conversation about the sound. Was it the Hampton Senator? You had mentioned something there where you were banning activity somewhere out in the seacoast. It wasn't done by a Republican. Whatever. I'm sure it was a great idea. Okay, but the reality is what do we do next? I mean, does that mean if someone hears snowmobiles out on Lake Winnipesaukee that we're now got to deal with a bill that says you can't ride snowmobiles or OHRVs on Lake Winnipesaukee or Lake Sunapee? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of wintertime activity that takes place. What's stopping somebody from doing the same thing there and coming up with the same arguments that says, well, if they ride these things on Lake Sunapee, there's an environmental impact? I still yet to see how much loss of ice. We're not talking icebergs here. We're talking about the surface of the water. The economic impact. I noticed you had a gentleman from the auto dealers here, and he had told me one time that, I think this goes back to 2010, that OHRVs bring $9 million of revenue to the state coffers. $9 million. And the number of jobs that are created. All right, so if we're going to keep chipping away and chipping away and chipping away at OHRVs, then we can start seeing less and less money. However, a pandemic has caused people to get these 4x4 side-by-sides, thank goodness, going up to the Ride of the Wilds, and I still pride myself co-sponsoring with Senator Gallus, is a boom. There is a lot more OHRVs out there now because of the pandemic, because one, there's at least 6 foot of distance, and two, is we didn't make it illegal. So when you decide on the future of this thing, I certainly hope that you realize that there's an economic piece. There's a lot less of an environmental piece that people would want you to think. And ultimately is, I think, to be honest with you, the way the thing was put into place, it was pure cronyism, and it bastardized the political process. And there was one other thing that was mentioned, but from the fishing game, from Captain Eastman, but I can't remember what it was. It must be old age. But thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to testify, and I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
You
All
let-
right. I would just say, here we don't disparage any other people who put bills in.
Oh, I did not mention any names.
know.
If you notice, I said where they were from. I did not mention names.
I get it.
Yeah.
No questions from the committee? See none, thank you.
Good to see you all.
Michael Timmons. And I would ask that for those who are testifying, if you could keep it to 3 minutes and preferably something we have not heard before. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and members of the committee. My name is Michael Timmons, and I'm from Loudon, New Hampshire. Mine may be a tad shorter now because I'm probably touching on some of the things that Captain Eastman has relied on. I can attest to the 40 years of riding at Hoyt because I've lived in Loudon for 50 years, and I remember the first time I went there was 10 for a multitude of reasons, meaning using my OHRV, skating. We used to shovel off hockey rinks on the way home from school, duck hunting in the past, and so on. In 2011, there was a gentleman that purchased a home in proximity to the Marsh who kind of objected to the OHRV use happening on the pond. We ended up becoming familiar with who he was because this individual would drive by, yell expletives at us, not liking us there. Shortly after that is when the complaints started coming into Fish and Game about our OHRV activity. Having a close affiliation with Fish and Game over the years, my dad taught hunter ed for 42 years. Knew a lot of the Fish and Game employees. I currently have relatives that work for Fish and Game, both of whom are biologists. They knew who I was as a character and a character of a person, so it was pretty hard to digest some of the things that were being said about us and what we were doing. The last thing I ever wanted to do is become a nuisance for anyone. Captain Wimsat, I had many communication with Captain Wimsat over the years regarding this. The 2015, when it came to a kind of a head, after Concord PD was being called as well and found no criminal activity or anything going on and everything we were doing was within legal right, he had me, this one individual contacted Senator Bradley, and I've had communications with him since and during this. Captain Wimsat wanted me to write up my summation of what was taking place on Hoyt. If I had specific times, dates, hours, usage. Prior to the 2015, so it would be 2011 to 2014, we made numerous accommodations, whether, we didn't start our trail bikes until 10 in the morning. Most of us were gone by 2. Captain Eastman is correct. Part of the reason that you don't see some activities certain times, because this is unbelievably seasonally dependent. So our wish is not to have too much snow. When we have too much snow, it's not really in favor for us to ride our trail bike. We've always maintained a hockey rink area, and actually thanked by the City of Concord residents over the years for doing so. So I'm not sure how we ever became a deterrent to ice fishermen or ice skiers when I played hockey there and I ice fished at the same time. Some of the ice fishermen actually came there and thanked us for opening up the entrance area from the city plows. I wrote up a response, and maybe similar to what Captain Eastman presented to you. This is the exact one that at the time, Captain Wimsatt asked me to write. And Sergeant Scott Lacrosse was involved. I knew him well because he actually lived in my town, and he knew who I was. So I kind of became a point of contact for any concerns. You know, on behalf of some of the ice riders, it was easier to kind of connect with one person. On days that I wasn't there, I could at least try to contact someone and say, you know, were you there these days, or were you there that day? 'Cause I didn't go every weekend, you know. He had communication with Senator Bradley. We actually tried to set up multiple meetings with the primary complainant at the time, like multiple times, and he never showed. So this leads us up to the 2019, where I was surprised as anyone else and kind of the wind taken at me when I saw it in the state budget. So I'll leave it at that for now. We kind of covered some of the other stuff that was about. I do have the exact correspondence that was given to Senator Bradley, if you guys would like that. If not, that's okay.
If you would like to give it to them, they can make copies for us.
And I can ask, if you have any questions, I apologize, I get a little nervous when
Okay, any questions from the committee? Senator Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You talk about this kind of activity has taken place on Hoyt Point for 40 years. Has the number of houses in the area increased over those 40 years?
Yeah, yep, not numerous. I mean, Hoyt Road Marsh is actually pretty big. An upland area also.
Okay, do you have any idea how many more houses are there now, roughly?
I believe 2009, nothing immediate near the house. I know there were 2 homes built in 2019 on the northwest corner, probably within the last few years. One of the homes wasn't there until 2019, which we weren't allowed to ride there anyway. And they apparently had a concern, but we weren't there when they were building their home, so I'm not sure how they ever saw or witnessed what we were doing. There was the subdivision built, I think it was a little over a half a mile away. I'm from Loudon, so I know the area well. I travel that road quite a bit to go to work. I actually traveled that road purposely quite a bit to go to work, just to try to relieve some pressure off Fish and Game that, you know, we didn't ever leave trash at the place. I'm pretty conscious about that, and I was probably more of an advocate for making sure everything that was brought in was taken out. So I take it to heart when someone says I'm leaving trash and destroying the place. I'm actually one of the ones that used to pick up all the TVs and mattresses. I've taken 3 TVs and mattresses to the dump on my own dime, just because we were stewards to the area. I do it with multiple areas in the Loudon Concord area.
Follow up?
So I'm not, you know.
So did you say there is a subdivision, recently built subdivision?
I can't be exact on the date. I think there were a series of 4 or 5 homes built right on the Loudon Concord line, which is about 3/4 of a mile away.
Okay,
But the homes that you see there now have been there for quite a while.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Senator Sherman.
Thanks, and thank you for working so hard to try to ameliorate this. It's very frustrating when somebody doesn't show up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Question is, if this repeal goes through, we're going to be back to that situation. What do you think can be done to minimize the complaints? What concrete steps or ideas do you have
Well, that was.
so that we don't, this just
Sure.
doesn't keep going?
And that was the initial, like, a lot of us tried. We actually waited over at Fish and Game one day. Now, Captain Wimsatt set up meetings with us or without us to make the other person comfortable, which I understand. Like I said, a lot of the accommodations we made willingly, but were also suggested by Fish and Game, meaning we moved the riding area further out in the pond, maybe the furthest point away from a home. And again, it's stated in some of the documents that this is unbelievably seasonally dependent. If a good winter for us is we're lucky if we get out there 5 times in the course of a winter. I mean, there've been statements say we ride from November to March. Well, I haven't seen a winter where we've had sufficient ice to ride on since I was a kid, you know, with that good enough ice and be safe enough to ride on. we made all the accommodations. I'm not sure, we're open to anything to alleviate any concerns. I mean, we've been upfront about it from day one, so.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
John Fontone. Carol? Susie Legg? Keg? P. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you much, Senators. I actually, the lady that the aforementioned representative talked about, I was the former Economic Development Director for the city, and that actually is absolute lies that he's told, but I've constantly talked about that. I've never had that much power ethically of the city. I would never be allowed. So once again, I have to defend myself, and that never did happen. But I am a resident of Hoyt Road, Marsh, on the Hoyt Road. And I just want to say, I have some testimonies here if you want to share. But I just want to say, I believe in the quality of life in New Hampshire. I love New Hampshire with a passion. As you can hear, I'm not from here, I'm from the United Kingdom. But what's been a pleasure in the last 3 years since the ban's in place is seeing the true quality of life through New Hampshire eyes, i.e. children skating on the pond, dogs and everyone playing with the pucks, people seeing ice skating generally, and snowshoeing. And it's been lovely just to watch, just to see that it's a multi-use pond. It's just not for the few, it's for the many. And I've wrote that all up in my testimony, but I really would like to see that continue. It brings peace to my heart. It's about New Hampshire. And I do hope that when you consider what's going to be the next step, that this is a use for lots of people, not just a few. And yes, it is noisy when the bikes are on, and I wish we had a decibel meter that I even have to leave home when it's so loud. And especially now we're in COVID, where both my husband and I work from home. I'd hate to have that noise going up when I'm trying to even be on a conference call, because they would actually hear it. So I'm going to keep it short because there's everything in that testimony I passed around. But thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me, and I wish you luck in your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Samuel Witham. Welcome. Again, we just try and keep everyone to about 3 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. I kept it short and brief for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out. Again, I just want to keep this short and get to the point. But basically, the major point that I wanted to make as a lifelong New Hampshire resident for 31 years is I don't really feel like this law pertains so much just specifically to OHRV. I feel like this law represents something that could happen at any point and any time, whether it be OHRV, bird watching, bicycling, hiking. If any one specific area could be taken away relatively easy for only the small benefit of a very few, I just don't think that really represents what New Hampshire and Live Free or Die is all about. Specifically, just the fact that if, hunting, for example, you can hunt in New Hampshire on any piece of land as long as it's not posted without permission. And if somebody wanted to specifically go about this way that this law was passed, I feel like certain things like that could easily be taken away just in certain tiny areas, which I just don't feel like is fair as far as what we live for and why most of us choose to live in New Hampshire. And that's all, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carter Sagan? Sagan? Welcome.
Thanks for listening to me speak. I'd just like to say that I've lived on Old Shaker Road, right down the road from the Marsh, for 20 years now. I am not affiliated with any type of dirt biking activity. I don't partake in it. I just don't find interest in it. But I've never had an issue with any of the noise coming from the dirt biking. I find that it's only, of course, during the wintertime and on weekends. Growing up, going to school at Merrimack Valley, driving by on the bus or going to school, there's never been any type of vehicles in the road causing any type of disturbances from what I've experienced going by every day going to school. Regarding noise, the noise that all the noise that can be heard is from the outdoors. It's not all day. It's always before, it's between dusk and dawn. It's not always all day. It's never during nighttime. I've never experienced it during the week for the 20 years I've been living there. Right now, my home borders the marshlands of the pond, so I have direct access to the pond. And of course, the noise isn't disturbing to me or my family in any way where there's been a complaint. It's there. Sometimes it isn't there. Sometimes it is. And I find passing by those years where the ice racing was active, there was ice fishers and there were people ice skating. And then the community there, well, I was never a part of it. It looked like they did a really good job keeping the pond accessible to everybody. And that's all I wanted to say. Did you have any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ethan Roy?
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I live on Snow Pond Road, about a mile from the Marsh, and my family, we hike down there. We also hike the Oak Hill Trails, and we've never really heard much from our way. We've never really seen a disturbance when we do hike. Can't really hear them from our house. When I drive by, I've never really been blocked or had to go out of my lane to pass any of the vehicles that are parked down there. It's never really been a disturbance in our lives, so that's about all I have to say.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Glenn Wells? Welcome.
I don't want to take up any more time than necessary. A lot of things have been said. I've been sitting there for quite a while and listening to both sides. The only thing I think that was pointed out by the opposition to this bill is the possibility of street blockage by traffic. There is a small parking lot on the other side of the road from the Marsh, and there's a small parking lot at the Marsh. Most of the times when the ice is good, a lot of vehicles park on the ice, as they do anywhere. I was up at the fishing derby a couple weeks ago, and there's people drive out on the ice with their campers, their trucks, as we did. Environmental impact, I can't imagine that there is any, as it's been testified. I forget what else I wanted to say. Someone mentioned that because of bikes being on the ice, that there wasn't the opportunity for cross-country skiing, ice fishing, snowshoeing. The part of the ponds that we occupy to do our activity, I would say I'd call it minimal. It's usually oval tracks. There's one for bigger bikes that I'm guessing is less than a quarter mile in distance. Could be a little more, let's call it a quarter mile. And we always have a track for the little kids, which is an eighth of a mile, maybe, an oval. I've heard that the pond is over 10 acres. I don't know what that would take up, but I have traveled. I lived in Loudon my whole life and traveled Hoyt Road for my whole life. Went to Merrimack Valley High School, which in those days, or Merrimack Valley School District, in those days we started in 5th grade. So there was 8 years of traveling back and forth on a school bus. I coached basketball at Merrimack Valley School District for 13 years. I can't tell you how many trips across that road. It is narrow. You have to drive slow. You have to be careful. The bridge where the water exits the marsh is narrow, and anybody who drives that road knows they have to go slow. Yes, 2 cars can fit across it at the same time, but you have to be careful. It was a question of emergency vehicles getting through. In all the years I've been riding there, and again, I'm one of those 40-year guys, I rode there at a very young age. My sons rode there, and my grandsons, who I brought with me today. And I appreciate them hanging in there, but they couldn't do it much longer. They learned something, and that was the goal today. I took them out of school to come here and see the process. I think that's it. I think everything's been said. I think you've heard enough from both sides. When I first started thinking about this, it brought me, as I get older, it made me think back to when I was a kid. I always wanted to be a skier. My family, growing up in Loudon, we were all poor. We didn't know it, but we were. Couldn't afford to go to a ski area. And my father he had a Volkswagen Bug. We lived on a dirt road, and he would tie a rope to the bumper of his Bug and tow me up and down the road on skis. And that's how I learned to ski. One day, happened to be Christmas Day after new skis, somebody saw it and didn't think it was right. And they were probably right in some ways. It was probably dangerous, but I didn't know it at the time. And the police, the local cop showed up that we knew. He said, hey, you can't do this anymore. And I didn't understand it. I do now. And again, I tell my grandchildren, sorry, we can't ride at this place where our group rides anymore. We can find places to ride. It's not the same. We had a group that rode there. Their families, their friends. They're great people. They're very respectful of the land. There was talk of no outhouses. I heard that brought up a couple times. And yes, the kids have to go across the street and into the woods to go pee when they have to go. I think that happens a lot in a lot of places. I'm not sure what else to say. Just wanted to say my part since we took the time to come here.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? I hope you all learned something. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day. John Messick. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I have some documents that I would like to submit to you for you to review at your convenience. And I don't expect to read these documents to you now.
Thank you.
Honorable Senators, thank you for holding a public hearing and permitting me to speak. My name is John Messick. I live in Loudon, New Hampshire. I'm a member of the Loudon Conservation Commission, but I am not representing the town of Loudon. I am testifying in support of the bill. I also happen to be the secretary of the Merrimack Valley Trail Riders. We're an OHRV club that was founded in 1972. We hold our membership meetings in Concord, and some of our members ride recreationally on frozen bodies of water in the area, informally known as the Ice Riders, as you know. So the first document I submitted is I call the Hoyt Road Marsh description. It consists of maps and photographs. As you may know, the marsh is wholly contained in a wildlife management area owned and managed by Fish and Game. Portions of the marsh are in Concord, a portion is in Loudon. It's isolated within 1 square mile of undeveloped public land. Only one house is visible from anywhere on the marsh, and it's almost a half a mile away. So it is not a dense residential neighborhood, far from it. I also would want to mention that more Loudon residents directly abut the public lands than Concord residents. The second document I submitted is titled the Turtletown Pond Sound Study. Sound level measurements were made with a calibrated sound measuring equipment of the ice riders at area homes at comparable distances to those homes on Hoyt Road Marsh. We would have preferred to conduct this study on the Loudon portion of Hoyt Road Marsh, but we were prevented from doing so, only because there's a single public access point and it's on the Concord side of the marsh. We talked with Captain Eastman about possibly towing the OHRVs with a snowmobile to get to the other side of the marsh, and it just wasn't practical. But I would also just want to mention that when Mayor Booley asked the Concord City Council for permission to pursue this original prohibition, the council asked him if, in fact, the ice riders were violating the noise ordinances. Mayor Booley's reply was that he didn't know. He only had the constituents' complaints, and he further stated that this point would be impractical to determine because it would require a Concord policeman with a sound meter, end quote. So we've never determined if, in fact, any sound ordinances were being violated. The last three documents I'm submitting are I obtained from New Hampshire DES. The first is a discussion paper on the public trust doctrine, which was written into the New Hampshire Constitution. It's a governing principle to balance the recreational interests of public water users and shoreline property owners. The next document are called the FIS Rules. It documents the statutory regulation of this marsh by Fish and Game and permits OHRV use on state-owned frozen bodies of water. Some opponents have testified that this legal justification doesn't exist, but it does. The last document is called the Dam Justification. It documents that the primary purpose of this wildlife management area is hunting, trapping, and fishing. The other recreational uses are secondary. It further states that DES built the dam to improve the habitat for game species. This marsh is not a wildlife sanctuary. It also documents that Fish and Game held the deed to the land prior to the dam construction and flooding. I find it hard to get upset about, and I'm a conservationist, about vibrations affecting salamanders and frogs when the primary purpose of this property is to kill wildlife. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay. But I do request that you take a look at these documents because I have highlighted the key sections.
Will do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Charles Jorgensen. Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Charles Jorgensen. I'm a resident of the city of Concord. I've been living here my whole life. I've only participated in motorcycle riding and been a member of the Merrimack Valley Trail Riders now for 6 years. A lot of people have come forward so far, and you're going to hear a lot more people come forward, most of which are up here opposing the repeal, are not giving you any facts whatsoever. They're all opinions, they're all feelings, something they don't like. I'm going to bring a couple facts to the table. One is that the Hoyt Road Marsh has been open to OHRV use since 1972, and probably many, many years prior to that, it's not documented, that we don't talk about. I'm also going to state that New Hampshire Fish and Game has testified here today with all the complaints that have been called in, whether it be to Fish and Game or to the city of Concord, that no violations have been seen or written up whatsoever concerning motorcycles, snowmobiles, any type of OHRV. There's been no violations written, no tickets, no fines, none whatsoever. Also, I'd like to state that the OHRV use has been active for over 40 years. Somebody else mentioned, and I firmly believe that the 40-plus years that the OHRV use has happened on Hoyt Road Marsh is a testament that it is not damaging the marsh, any wildlife, or the water. If there was visible proof, I'm sure something else would have been taken place, some type of studies. There's been a lot of talk of the environment on this subject. And it's not really the main subject. The main subject is that OHRV use has been banned on the Hoyt Road Marsh. It was done behind closed doors without any public hearings. And most of that happened due to the non-diligence, the lack of doing their homework and a little bit of research by my city council and my mayor, Jim Boulay, and any of the other members at the time when he brought it forth to the city council. And I don't really firmly believe that he had enough information to have it placed at the end of a budget, however it transpired, without any public hearing. And now we're here today. We've been here for one other prior hearing, and there's been a lot of meetings prior to this that have taken up a lot of time and energy for a few. And the few that oppose the ban or oppose the repeal of the ban are not bringing any facts whatsoever to the last hearing or to this hearing. They're letting you know that there's noise. There's all kinds of noise with all kinds of activities. Noise from motorcycles, noise from snowmobiles, noise from shooting guns. It's discerning that we have come this far on this particular subject. We should overturn and repeal and bring OHRV use back to the Hoyt Road Marsh, the way it was for 40 years and the way it should continue for the next 100. Nothing more than that. And as far as the environment, I would like to say that the Merrimack Valley Trail Riders, the president, Tom Levesque, had put a piece of information, sent in a piece of information that provides a lot of information. It's very simplified for you to go through. But the organization, we are stewards to the land. A lot of people don't see us as stewards because they see us maybe tearing up a little bit of dirt or ripping up the ice. But the first time that I went to ride on the Hoyt Road Marsh, when I bought a motorcycle and went out there to ride, I brought my motorcycle out on the ice. I had 5 members from the Merrimack Valley Trail Riders come up to me and tell me that I could not bring fuel onto the ice. Members of my own group came to me and told me that I could not have a gas can out on the ice because I didn't know better. And they were the stewards at that particular moment. They're informing me, they're educating me every time that we meet, every time that we do things. I don't have much more to say. I appreciate all your time and your effort in this matter. Once again, I think it's a shame that it's come this far, but I really firmly believe that the repeal should happen and we should get use of the Hoyt Road Marsh back the way it was.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
James Stever. Before you start, I'm just, reminder, I'm trying to get everyone to limit themselves to about 3 minutes because we still have another page of testimonies. Thank you.
Sounds good. Chairwoman Birdsell and honorable members of the committee, I have lived in very close proximity of the Hoyt Road Marsh and a resident of East Concord since 2011. My house is approximately 1/2 mile from the marsh, and I've enjoyed this natural setting in a rural part of Concord. That is, until the motorcycle started racing around the marsh in the winter several years back, which had the effect of excluding all other uses of the marsh. In fact, the motorcycle racers plow large tracks over a great majority of the marsh, making it impossible for members of the public to use the marsh for all other recreational uses such as ice fishing, skating, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, youth hockey, bird watching, etc. The careless disregard of the motorcycle racers for others who use the marsh in the winter grew steadily worse until 2019, when residents in my area and the city of Concord came together to encourage the legislator to ban motorcycle racing on the marsh. Since the ban has been in place over the past 2 years, it has been a pleasure to go outside and enjoy a quiet winter day without the relentless noise of these machines droning on for hours and hours in the background. We have enjoyed seeing the ice skaters, ice fishermen safely return to enjoy the marsh as it should be available to be used. HB 571 has been proposed, and if adopted, it would eliminate all other uses of the marsh and destroy the peaceful enjoyment of my property and that of my good neighbors once again. I'm here to ask respectfully that HB 571 be rejected. Let's be clear as to what motocross riding on a frozen pond means based on my personal observations. This was an unmonitored, unregulated, continuously increasing number of motorcycles and dirt bikes with spiked wheels driving at high and reckless speeds in violation of the law in circles on the ice for hours at a time on any day of the week, including holidays. These machines indisputably create continuous excessive noise. Hoyt Road Marsh is a wildlife management area with a stated primary purpose as identified on the Fish and Game website, quote, to protect and improve habitat for wildlife. Any wildlife exposed to the very loud noise of these machines will be driven away from the area. Organized motocross racetrack riding degrades wildlife habitat and is therefore completely contradictory to the stated primary purpose of this area. In conclusion, I respectfully request that HB 571 be designated inexpedient to legislate, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Thank you for taking my question. This is just to clarify. I see on the top here it says February 16, 2022. On the second page, it says 21/6/2022.
What's
Is
that?
there-
February 2/16, 2022? That's when I prepared the statement and signed it, so. Sorry, I'm not understanding the.
So the line should have been after the 2 instead of after the.
Oh, yeah, that's a 1, so that's the.
Okay, so that's the 1, okay.
Oh,
Fine.
everything okay?
Yes.
Got the date right? Cool. Is that the only question you have?
That was the only question I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
No, but
Julie Lane? Welcome.
Thank you. Please forgive the black eye. I had some surgery last week. So my name is Julie Lane, and I am an abutter to the marsh. I have submitted written testimony that does give you factual evidence and links to the Fish and Game website and some of the information that DEAS has available, which gives you the factual information you may need, contrary to what some of the information has been stated today. So I just want to make a few points. One of the concerns with the amount of cars.
Can you please shut that off?
the amount of cars in the parking lot when there's racing is that the emergency vehicles actually can't get onto our road where we live. I live on Talent Road. There are several houses on Talent Road that are visible from the marsh, despite prior testimony. And the fire trucks actually cannot turn onto Talent Road and have to go past our road to the parking lot that would be full of vehicles, turn around and come back. So there is a safety hazard for houses that live on the road when that parking lot is full or there's trucks parked up and down and only one car can get through. There was actually a fire in one of the houses on our road several years ago, and a lot of damage occurred, partly because the truck took longer to get there. There is also, some people have talked today about how they tried to reach out to one person who they thought was the sole person, causing this ban. There are a number of neighbors, 20 or 30, many of which are here today, who all have concerns about the noise, the environment, and the access. I've been able to enjoy going out into the marsh the past 3 years when there hasn't been racing with my nephews, my mother, going out, snowshoeing or walking and just enjoying the environment, talking to fishermen, watching kids ice skate, and none of that is possible when there are the motorcycles racing around the marsh. The track comes from the parking lot and then does come closer to some of the houses on Talent Road. The riders might not be looking up through the trees to realize that we are there because they're going fast, but there are houses there. There's been many more bikes over the years, so where there may have been 1 or 2 bikes, 10 or 20 years ago, part of the issue was a vast increase in the number of bikes. In my testimony that I submitted to you via email, one of the members of the House went to the Turtle Pond place and they counted like 42, vehicles that day. Last year, I believe it was, when they were trying to get a sense of what had been happening at Hoyt Road. They went to the Turtle Pond racing to observe what it was like. So that gives you an idea. In response to one of the questions about the impact on the environment, I can't remember and I can't pull it up on my phone today, but there has been, maybe in the Senate here, a bill that was passed where Fish and Game was supposed to conduct an OHRV impact study. I believe that was due last January. It hasn't been done yet. So those requests have already been made. It was made several years ago. They had a period of time to do it. It hasn't been done. So you could check the facts on that if you would like, and I can try to send that to you later today. Common sense is that exhaust gets trapped in the ice, or if you have motorcycles driving in circles, it's going to create an excessive nuisance. It's not just a motorcycle driving by. We all know what one motorcycle driving by our house sounds like, but if you have 10 or 20 in circles constantly, it's a noise problem.
Ms. Lane, can you wrap it up?
Yes, I will wrap it up. I don't want to contradict Fish and Game, but I unfortunately have to, despite what Captain Eastman has talked about. Many of the abutters have never received any communication. We were not, reached out to discuss compromises. Fish and Game does have a study posted on their website about the impact on wildlife. I have that linked in the testimony I sent you, and they talk about, especially in the winter, there's an impact on the wildlife. So they have a lot of documentation on their website, including the impoundment being created with the intention of, as was stated, creating a wildlife management area to protect the animals that are there. It's not for motorcycle racing to occur. There are other locations where that can certainly happen. There's thousands of miles of OHRV trails, but I would really appreciate, all citizens being able to use the marsh for its intended purpose. Wildlife viewing and bird watching also brings an enormous amount of money, actually more money into the state than the other activities. That's also in my submitted written testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Waters.
Yes, thank you, thanks for testimony. So the issue about the access to fire equipment, does the city of Concord post any sections, no parking on Hoyt Pond Road?
I have not seen any signs that say that.
And you could request such a designation through your city council?
I suppose you could. We've also asked them to look at, changing the way the road is angled, and that has been not approved. Not officially through the city council, but we've talked to people, and, when there's no cars parked up and down the sides, then there's no problem. The truck can come and turn around, it's a problem because there's a delay, but if there's cars parked up and down on the sides, that would make it more difficult or impossible.
Senator Sherman?
Prior to the ban, you lived there before the ban?
I did not. I have lived in Concord for 15 years. We are in the process of building a house, that was, we purchased the property in 2019. So we've enjoyed the peace and quiet for 3 years.
Okay, I can't ask the question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Other neighbors of mine are here and could probably answer that question for you. I do want to add that there's a ban on roosters in Concord. One rooster is considered a nuisance. So if you compare one rooster to the sound of the motorcycles, it's a residential area that surrounds the marsh in Concord. And for some reason, we can't seem to, take care of the noise issue with the motorcycles.
What about hens?
Hens are fine. You can have 5 on a small lot.
Interesting. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Glenn Horner? Again, I remind, go ahead.
3 minutes.
Yes.
I'll try to make it quick. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today and provide testimony. My name is Glenn Horner, and I currently reside in Epsom, New Hampshire. My son-in-law, who spoke previously, is James Stever, and with my daughter Marley, they live out at Generation Farms, and he asked me to come today and speak from my experience. I'd like to start with reviewing 2 key points I made in my testimony, my written testimony. The first he already covered, and that is the primary purpose of a wildlife management area as specified on the Fish and Game website. It is to protect and promote wildlife. Fast machines driving in circles for hours at a time, day after day, week after week, for months, is a deterrent to wildlife. I think it's contrary to the primary purpose. They should at least change their website. It goes on to say that there are recreational activities that they would suggest, and they are the typical hunting, fishing, and trapping. I don't see where motorcycle riding is consistent with any of those activities. Quite to the contrary, if it scares the wildlife, it's not. But it's the 4th activity, and that's where I'm going, and that is the wildlife viewing. That's number 4. How much wildlife viewing is going to go on when you've got these motorcyclists driving their machines at high rates of speed for hours on end? The second point I want to make was from the written testimony, and that's how it relates to local control. I think overturning this ban disregards the expressed wishes of the taxpaying residents, the majority of taxpaying residents in the vicinity of Hoyt Road Marsh, as well as the stated position of the city. This is a break from New Hampshire's long tradition of local control, and I think it sets up a precedent for similar unwanted activities elsewhere. Residents don't get a cut. Someone from out of town want to do this, great, drive all over the place. On a more personal note, I moved to East Concord in 1966, where the Hoyt Road Marsh is located. I graduated from Concord High in 1969. I've lived in this area pretty much ever since. I've enjoyed the natural environment of the marsh for skating, snowshoeing, hiking on the Riley trails, and similar activities, snowshoeing. And here I want to break from my testimony for a moment. I heard 40 years. I've been around that marsh for longer than that. This started about 10 years ago, and it's just gotten worse. So I'm on the zoning board in Epsom. We always look for evidence. This is disputed evidence, and I think you've heard other disputed evidence from other members that live there. I think they should produce evidence of 40 years. That's way out of the box. Also, there was a thing about the plowed circles. Well, yeah, when there's no snow, though, they ride all over the pond. I was there. I witnessed it on skates. Once they did that, they chewed up the ice. There was no more skating on Hoyt Road Pond from that point forward. So it precluded skating. And who wants to go on the marsh for other activities when you've got this buzzing in your ear? And believe me, I don't know about magnesium, whatever it is, but these things are loud. and you can hear them on some YouTube tapes. Full disclosure, I ride a motorcycle. I've been riding a motorcycle for almost 60 years, and I love it. And I sympathize with these ice riders who like to get up on two wheels and drive around. That's great. But I would no sooner pull the baffles out of my muffler and drive around in somebody's neighborhood than I would cut them off in traffic. It's selfish, and it's not sportsmanlike. So what's the solution? Everybody's looking for a solution. How do we please everybody, right? That's what we say as government officials. And for that, I look at the historical development of small engine sports in this state and elsewhere.
Could you wrap it up?
Sure. Snowmobiles began by securing landowners' permission. They built their trails. They posted them no-wheels vehicles for the protection of the property rights and respect out of property rights, and to prevent damage to trails. Everybody was happy. Along came ATVs. Town of Gorham said they didn't have a place to go, no-wheel vehicles. Town of Gorham said, come on up. We need our businesses. Bring your money. We got plenty of trails. Problem solved. Now come the ice riders. Isn't it incumbent upon them to do their due diligence and find a home where they are wanted and welcome? I believe this is the best solution to the problem, and I hope you agree with me.
Thank you. Senator Sherman?
So I'm looking for someone who had experience while they were still ice riding on the pond, on the marsh.
Sure.
And we heard testimony today that there was plenty of other activities. So there were children out having ice hockey, there was snowshoeing and skating. And was all of that taking place while the ice riders were out there?
Nobody but the ice riders. Once they're on the pond, there's plenty of natural places to go to elsewhere where you can enjoy the natural environment. Nobody's going to go on a pond where these guys are racing around. It's dangerous. They're driving 56 miles. You know, you talk about the RSA and the mufflers and so on. There's an RSA for motor vehicle mufflers. But you can come over to Epsom and you can listen to trucks and motorcycles driving around all day without any mufflers. Those RSAs aren't anything without enforcement. And that's what's been going on out at that pond. There is no enforcement. That's what I've witnessed. It's a free-for-all. It has been, and it will be if this ban is overturned.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew Stout?
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. It's not every day I get to sit in front of a Senate committee and speak. Try my best without being nervous.
Again, I ask you to try and limit it to 3 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
My name's Andrew Stout, for the record. I live here in the city of Concord, New Hampshire, particularly in Pennacook, about 5 miles away from Hoyt Road Marsh. I'm here in favor of this bill. There was just a couple of points I wanted to bring up. I know you've heard a lot of things over and over and over, but one of the points I wanted to bring up is a question for you folks in how this bill or how this law actually got passed to begin with. Are you aware of how this got introduced years ago? As a taxpayer to the city of Concord and to the state of New Hampshire, I find it pretty appalling in the way it was introduced, the way it got passed. It's a wrong that needs to be made right. Second of all, in a lot of the opposition I hear I. This body of water belongs to the state of New Hampshire. That's us, not I. Also, it's not racing, it's riding. I've been over there quite a few times when they've been riding. It's a great family, fun atmosphere. There's no crazy stuff going on. There's people that are out there ice fishing at the same time. They like seeing it. There are kids that come over and check the bikes out, and it's a good atmosphere. It's a positive atmosphere. The other point I want to bring up also is if this happens here, it's going to happen across the state, and that's what I worry about. What's to say that all of a sudden somebody like Winnipesaukee doesn't like their snowmobile going by at 2 o'clock in the morning because they're right next to a snowmobile trail? You guys are going to be inundated with this. Other than that, I'm for this bill. I recommend that the committee members all vote for this bill. I hope you do. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Francis and Thomas Hopper. Welcome.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you. My wife and I
Sorry about that.
have been more than 40 years living on Hoyt Road at 210 Hoyt Road, which required a rather lengthy driveway to get up to the height of land that existed there, and that turned out to be quite beautiful because we actually ended up with sort of more privacy and a lot of quietness. And I was an avid skater, but I don't do it anymore. not at my age. And so we are in opposition to House Bill 571 to allow the cycles to be there. And the main thrust for me is actually there are multiple issues that I think of. Which one is the earth itself? I'm actually very concerned about the environment of what's happening on our earth. It's wilder winds, very strong winds, more strength than some of my pine trees can actually handle, getting to be that way. And they are marvelously tall, beautiful trees, but they seem to be really working very, very hard with the very strong winds that are occurring. And globally, I think that there is climate change that's happening. There's much more carbon into the atmosphere, and that is a very serious thing. It's actually probably one reason why the environment is changing, and I think changing in a negative way as opposed to some positive thing. So we are opposed to allowing those cycles there. The noise is significant. It's sometimes it's actually sounded almost dangerous to me. The sound that can come out of these exhaust pipes that get destroyed for some reason or another. I think that the main thing is that we're running out of time on the earth to protect it. That's my message to this committee. I think we have a serious environmental issue. What do you point? So the motorcyclists ruin things. They ruin the natural wildlife and they pollute the planet. And I have observed flocks of birds and other animals that immediately leave the marsh when the motorcyclists first arrive on any given day. Wildlife does not want to be anywhere near that noise at all. And they all go get it airborne right away, but then they fly right across our property, which is very often that we actually see their flight path. It's quite beautiful to see it, but we worry about that. And you have a comment you would like to make?
Just make those points that this is the statement that
We're only a quarter of a mile away, basically, from this thing, so we usually hear the loud sounds. If there's more than two bikes, it gets to be some sort of a combined sound, which is that sound that I was referring to as a chainsaw. It's a great treasure, the marsh. I think it's something to be protected. I think it's something that should be valued. I think it should be cared for. And if that's done, then the wildlife will be cared for. And I think those are important. Anything else, Fran?
Yeah, I have a statement to read too.
Okay. It can be quick about it.
Thank you. My husband and I are strongly opposed to House Bill 571. We have lived about a quarter mile east of Hoyt Road Marsh since 1984, so that's 38 years. Before the motorcycles started using the marsh, we used to cross-country ski. My husband and son skated there. We used to see family groups skating on the marsh on weekends, and young people had informal hockey games. After the motorcycles became more numerous, all of these family-oriented recreational activities stopped due to the noise and activity of the motorcycles and riders. In addition, the noise carried long distances. Many people could hear this loud chainsaw noise in our houses on weekends when there was ice on the marsh. We strongly oppose the reintroduction of motorcycles on the marsh. We greatly appreciate and support James Stever's efforts to keep the motorcycles off the marsh. We urge the committee to vote against House Bill 571. And that's my statement. I just wanted, Jack Flanagan made a statement, I don't know exactly what he said, but it was something about we're not damaging or harming wildlife by using these motorcycles on the marsh. And while I was sitting here, I just made a list of the different animals we've seen over the years, either at the marsh or within a quarter of a mile. We've seen deer, moose, porcupine, bobcat, beaver, groundhogs, bear, mink, squirrels, chipmunks, and skunks. I guess you could argue that the skunks may not be a great asset to the environment, although I'm sure they have their purpose. Also, a large variety of birds, many birds overwinter here rather than migrating. And we've seen large birds such as turkey and quail. So I think to say that the wildlife isn't affected or harmed by this motorcycle riding is basically wrong.
Thank you.
So I guess that's about it for me.
Thank you
Any
very much.
questions? Senator Sherman.
Thank you, and thank you for testifying. Do you know if there are bird watchers or birders in the marsh? Somebody had talked about that one of the charges of Fish and Game was for, I think it was watching the wildlife. But are there is this a birding refuge or a place where birders go?
I'm not a member of Audubon, and that would be a way of really knowing what was going on. I know that in the spring, when the ice is starting to melt, there are a large number of migrating species, and that's true in the fall too. I've seen uncommon mergansers and great blue herons, and I can't really think right now, but just a number of different migrating birds. And I know that would be a time when people would come to look. I can't really speak for how many people. Probably you'd need to ask Audubon Society about that kind of thing.
But at that time, the ice is out, correct?
That's when the ice is going out. It may not be completely out, but at that time, the motorcycles aren't there. Yeah. But there are many birds that are there during the winter.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
We've seen other kinds of wildlife on the marsh too. Of course, there's all kinds of creatures that are out there. We've been able to go across the ice with our dog, and we'd see different creatures. So it's a pretty active place. It's beautiful. And beauty is something to be protected, that kind of beauty, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Tom Levesque.
Thanks a lot. Great. I'll get this.
Long day for you.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Tom Levesque. I'm the president. I live in Derry. I'll have to have you over for coffee sometime. We'll talk about this. I also have a camp in the North Country. I'm the president of the Merrimack Valley Trail Riders, who represent a OHRV club of approximately 600 members spread throughout New Hampshire. In partnership with the Bureau of Trails, we've developed and maintained a multi-use OHRV trail called Hopkinton Everett Riding Area in Ware, New Hampshire. We're very knowledgeable on proper procedure for trail development and building, and see ourselves as stewards for these trails and for that particular forest body. I'm also an avid hunter, a fisherman. I build and paddle kayaks, not sea kayaks, but lake kayaks, as Mr. Sherman's involved with. I'm an outdoorsman, an environmentalist. I'm not simply a perceived motorhead. I'm an outdoorsman. To speak to a few things that were said earlier, with respect to environmental testing, if the prohibition was repealed, I would invite DES, Fish and Game, and whoever else would be required to do testing of the area and in the water, keeping in mind the pollution that's produced possibly by the users and the local residents who have done clear cutting and new homes that are adding to the pollution from their runoff. Congested parking that was mentioned, there is a state-owned parking area that was developed for the use of Hoyt Road Marsh users. The state of Concord had a hiking, or has hiking trails in the area, had a parking area approximately a half a mile away, which they closed because they didn't want to maintain it. So the hikers, too, use that particular parking area. So the parking area is being used not only by the ice riders when we were riding, but also the hikers. So any congestion, who's to blame? The hikers or the users on the ice? And we would suggest and promote that the town of Concord, even now, approach the Department of Transportation, put some signage up, parking on only one side of the road. We'll deal with that. A lot of our parking, we're out on the ice. We're off the road. So back to my prepared testimony. The package that I prepared for you is my testimony, pictures that I would like to relate to, a wetland scientist letter, Yellowstone National Park article, an AMA letter who represents about 1,500 members here in the state of New Hampshire. We didn't ask him to go as an outsiders and come introduce anything, but they're representing these folks. And a supporting statement that we directed via your emails to you on Sunday evening, which I believe if you're able to bruise it, a lot of the conversations that have come out today have been announced and rebutted in as simple a form as we could. So if you didn't get it Sunday night or wasn't able to access it, you now have it. How has the state viewed similar attempts at local control of state water bodies? In 2009, the town of Marlow attempted to pass an ordinance on Stone Pond. Similarly, in 2012, the town of Ossipee tried to get the lake controlled by the town. It failed. Both of those failed. In 2021, House Bill 534 aimed to turn control of a frozen body of water over to the municipality. It too failed. What does the prohibition left in place mean to the future state-owned bodies of water? In New Hampshire, almost 960 bodies of water, 10 acres or more, is owned by the state. Of all these, this is the only body of water owned by the state that has any type of prohibition on it, on frozen body. I understand there was a conversation that jet skis are banned on liquid water. We're talking right now and for today on frozen bodies of water. The prohibition sets a dangerous precedent for state-owned properties and the potential for a patchwork of regulations. Left to stand, the president may allow special interests to close state properties to fishing because of loud augers, too many shanties, possibly to trapping, snowmobile, and other uses. The picture that is part of my package, there's three pictures. The first shows several adults with kids just having fun with their adults. The second picture with three riders is myself and my two grandsons. This is our family recreation.
Mr. Levesque,
Sir,
can I ask
ma'am.
you to speed it up a little?
I'm sorry. If you have 10 kids playing hockey on Hoyt Road Marsh, that if his activity is recreation, it's not a tournament. If we see 10 or so people running down the street for exercise, that's not a marathon, they're recreating. Do I look like a racer in that? No. That's our recreation. 2 of those machines are road registered and allowed to be on Hoyt Road Marsh, regardless of the ban. Just as Jeeps are still allowed, snowmobiles are still allowed. Recently, opponents to this bill have insinuated this activity caused an environmental impact. We have produced, and you have in front of you, a letter from William Thomas, a New Hampshire certified wetland scientist, who writes, "There is no scientific information to support the idea that there is direct detrimental impact to wetlands by riding on frozen water." Also, the opponents have claimed wildlife disturbance. If you take a look at the article from the Billings Gazette with respect to Yellowstone National Park, they have ceased a study that began 6 or 8 years ago. They have ceased it because of the following. Wildlife is not affected by motorized activity in the animal's vicinity. Wildlife showed little to no response or displayed a so-called look and resume response. Similar findings were conducted by Yellowstone National Park in 2002, 2004. There is scientific data that shows there's no impact. I wish to highlight the discriminatory closure directed by a municipality of a state property protected by the public trust. Additionally, making note that limits on the public's rights should not be allowed without public input and proper legislative process, which you are allowing now. The rights of the landowners who abut state resources do not outweigh the rights of the general public to use those resources. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing
Thank you.
none, thank you. Linda Stevenson? And can I just remind everyone to try and keep it to 3 minutes? We still
go
have
quick.
a number of speakers.
Thank you, Madam Chair and honorable committee members. My son and I live, and his family are direct abutters of the marsh on Talent Road. You see Hoyt Road Marsh from Hoyt Road, but you just see a little bit of it. It opens up, and there's many homes along Talent Road that are direct abutters of the marsh. We bought this property in 2008 and have spent considerable time on our property since then as we planned and then built our homes there. They in 2013 and I in 2019. Initially, and this is important, initially we noticed a few motorcycles on the marsh, but it wasn't a big deal. But as the years progressed, we noticed more and more riders on the marsh. Riders come from all over the state. The noise, congestion, and exclusive use, because you can't be out there when these huge circles, and they do race, are going on, became bad enough that Concord Mayor Boulay observed it firsthand and found it unacceptable. Without the motorcycles racing around in huge circles, you see multiple other uses of the marsh in winter, and people have enumerated what those various uses are. And the occasional snowmobile, they're out there, that's fine. They're not making huge noise and keeping other people away. This last winter, the last winter they were allowed to race on the marsh. The adjacent area was congested and Hoyt Road was difficult to drive on. The limited parking, and in that small parking area directly by the marsh, you can maybe have 4, 5, 6 cars parked there, but they need to bring their motorcycles. So you're looking at, trailing vans and trucks, and it's not an area that can take more than 4 or 5 automobiles. So the area gets congested, and it's on a narrow curving section of Hoyt Road. The noise is also quite loud, and now this is the honest to God's truth. Actually shaking dishes in my china cupboard with the doors closed. Nothing fell and broke, but it was loud enough that it rattled dishes in my china cupboard. I also have concerns about the environmental impact on the marsh and wetlands surrounding it. Hoyt Road Marsh is just that, a shallow marsh in a large wetlands area. Captain Eastman of Fish and Game stated that there is no proof of any environmental impact on the flora and fauna in the marsh area. I would counter that there is no study, official study, that has been done supporting this view, and studies in other areas in New Hampshire have shown that there is impact. The city of Concord has taken a stand. I would hope local control would be allowed to prevail, and that a majority of citizens in Concord should have a say.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Jeremy Pegg. Again, can I just remind everyone to keep it to 3 minutes?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name's Jeremy Pegg. I live at Hoyt Road, about 300 to 400 yards from the marsh, depending which bit you measure it to. I've submitted a written testimony, so please read that. Problem that we have is when the bikers come along on a Thursday night, usually, they mark out their oval. That's where they're going to be riding. That means that I can't put my fishing shanty there. That means I can't take my kids out on the marsh that weekend because I have a bunch of amateur riders zipping around at 50, 60 miles an hour. I'm not going to put my kids in danger. They are taking my rights away from me by doing their riding on the bikes. I live to cross-country ski. My skating days are long behind me. I will not go on that marsh while the bikes are on there. That's not through choice, that's through a concern for my safety. The noise issue has been tackled elsewhere, but ladies and gentlemen, for the sake of the marsh, for the people who live there, please make the marsh available to people who want to play a dozen other sports on the weekend. Don't just single out one sport that can safely use the marsh. So please, keep the ban on the bikes. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Senator Waters.
Thank you. Thanks for waiting around and being here today. So if you were to put a shanty out there, the existing statute says that any activity by these vehicles within 150 feet of it would have to accord to the state regulation on that. I mean, not that I want anybody in a situation they're going to stick it somewhere they feel, this is
I'm aware of the
problematic and so on,
regulation,
but you do have a right to.
I do
to
have the
a
right,
shanty
and I
out
trust
there.
that if I exercise that right next year, Captain Eastman will defend me as well as he's defending the bikers. But I do have that right. I don't want conflict. But we do have that right. But please you wouldn't put your kids out there. Would you go out to your constituents and say, well, we have a pond in the area. Some people can come along and they can start using it with their biking. They're going to put your kids in danger, put you in danger. Is that what you want to go back and tell your constituents? That Fish and Game won't do a damn thing about it? Because they don't. They don't lift a finger, Fish and Game. I have a video, which is very, very brief, which does nothing but give you an example of the noise. This is taken from viewing platform 150 yards away from where the bikers were. You can see the bikers in the distance, or you could if you had the video here. This is what we have to put up with for hours on end every weekend in the winter.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
That was taken January 13th, 2019 at Hoyt Road Marsh.
Thank you.
So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Jennifer Bowfinger?
I have property that abuts Hoyt Road. I've lived there for 25 years, and I am opposed to lifting the ban on having motorcycles. As you have heard, and I will keep this very brief because I didn't really prepare anything, I already presented written testimony about my experience, my 25 years experience of using the marsh for all of the uses such as snowshoeing, skating, walking the dog, pulling the kids in sleds. I feel that the motorcycle use is completely incompatible with those other uses. When I'm skating and someone is skiing when I'm skiing and someone is fishing, those are all compatible uses of this small marsh that's happens to be in our neighborhood. The motorcycles exclude the other activities, just by the noise, the chaoticness, the fumes. It doesn't make a pleasant experience out on the ice. As a landowner, homeowner, taxpayer who lives in that area and chose that area of Concord, my husband was born and raised in Concord, so that we could still take advantage of the great city of Concord, but live out in the woods and have a quieter lifestyle. I have 40 acres out there. The incessant noise from the motorcycles on the weekends, it interrupts my ability to enjoy my property, to be outdoors. I'm outdoors on my property every single day, no matter what time of year it is. I do a lot of my own firewood cutting, trail building, different activities outside. Motorcycles, that noise that you heard, that brapping, that's all day long, 2 days on the weekend when you go outside, and that's what you hear. So it really interferes with my ability to enjoy my property. Lastly, I want to say that that marsh is a really special place, and the motorcycles have not been using it for 40 years. I've been there 25 years. It was only an intense period. It felt like 2015, 16, 17, 18, where it did just get ratcheted up, and there were so many people out there. I feel like we as a society don't need any more interference with our ability to be out and engage with nature. And I feel like that's what happens when those motorcycles are out there. They prevent other people from going out and experiencing the marsh and just appreciating and interacting in that native, natural setting. And I just think that because the motorcycles are chaotic and noisy and fumy, it's just not an appropriate use for Hoyt Road Marsh. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So we only have two more speakers. Richard Parsons?
I've submitted my testimony and I'll defer to the last speaker in the interest of time.
Thank you. Xander Rice Hawkins.
Thank you. I'll make my remarks short as well. My name is Sandra Rice Hawkins. I am the Concord City Councilor for Ward 10, which this situation is centered, and I cannot speak to this better than some of the constituents who've already shared their experiences, but I would draw your attention to two specific things. One is that you've heard that this is a family pastime for a lot of people to come up and use the marsh in this way, and I support those family activities. The problem is that it has become out of sync with what that district and that pond should be used for, and it's come at the cost of other users being able to go and enjoy themselves and use recreational activities. I think you heard from testimony earlier today, we've certainly heard it in a couple of the public hearings on this topic in the past, that more and more people continue to come up and be a part of these weekend events. And again, that's great, except for it is getting too big and too loud and too long for that area. And so we'd ask you to take that into consideration. There are so many wonderful ways in which we can use this resource. We want to make sure all users in the community can go out and have those compatible recreational experiences. The second piece of it is the noise factor, and you heard a little bit of a video, but I would ask you to think about what it would be like if you had to endure that noise in your own home, on your own property, all day long throughout the weekend. And I think we can all agree that, you know, your home is your home, your quality of life and being able to enjoy the space that you've built for yourself and have those activities at home is a really important part of your experience in a community, and it is really detrimental, unfortunately, to these families who have to put up with this disruption on a regular basis and feel really like they didn't have any other means other than to come to the State House and advocate for an opportunity to be able to have control over their own experience in their own home. And so I'd ask you to consider taking a look at some of the videos online where you can experience that firsthand. Think about how that would be if it were your own home or a constituent in your district, and to consider making sure that this space stays protected by keeping the current law in place. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I apologize, I did miss two people. Tracy Bovavage? Welcome.
I've written testimony. I'm sorry we're going to be the last ones late. I'm sure you're tired. Don't. Thank you, Senator Bertzel and committee members for allowing me to speak. Such a late, I've heard so many testimonies, I'm sorry. Mine's going to be a little different. I am Tracy Borvage, and I'm the president of New Hampshire Motorcycle Rights Organization. I am from Bedford, but I represent the motorcyclists in the state of New Hampshire. I am here today in support of HB 571. It's kind of interesting, just this morning I was in the House in the Transportation Committee testifying on anti-motorcycle profiling. And it seems to me today, a lot of the testimony I've heard is just that motorcyclists, these ICE riders, are being discriminated against, they're being profiled because they ride a motorcycle. That bothers me as the representative of the motorcycling community. These are families, and I understand the abutters don't like the sound, but I don't like the sound that in my house, that the Manchester Airport decided to change the runway and it now is closer to my home. There's a lot of people that don't like that the highways, built highways larger, and the sound now is more in their homes. I understand that, but it's all something that we live with. So to be singled out as motorcyclist, and I noticed I wanted to bring up something that I find interesting. Snowmobiles were not part of this. I guess snowmobiles are quiet. They don't make noise. They're not fast. I ride a snowmobile. That's not the truth. That bothers me also. So as a motorcyclist, I feel like we're targeted. The other thing that I thought was interesting, that on the social media, which I don't particularly love, but also in media, we were targeted. They were called scary, disrespectful, and dirty. Motorcyclists are not that, but that's what these ice road riders were called. So I'm here to represent the motorcyclists, these families, these kids. They're not just parents, they're not just adults, they're kids that rode ice ride motorcycles. I think it's wrong that they're being targeted because they're motorcycles. I think it's wrong that the noise is the biggest complaint, one of the biggest complaints. I ride a motorcycle in my neighborhood in Bedford. I have all of that wildlife in my neighborhood. I have it in my yard. I have 9.5 acres. I've never scared the deer or the turkey or the black bear that lives in the backyard of my house. So all of those things can be refuted. But what I'm asking you is to have us be targeted because we ride a motorcycle is wrong. It's wrong. So I'm asking you not to take just the word of people saying, we don't like motorcyclists. We don't like motorcyclists. And please vote to pass HB 571. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Joseph Bonanno?
Try to make it quick. My name's Joseph Bonanno. Resided in Merrimack County for 41 years. I own a local farm that abuts Interstate 93. I also ride motorcycles, not race, on Hoyt Road, Marsh. My father's been riding there since 1974 on a Botaco, a Spanish bike. I still have that bike. I still ride it. Hoping my 15-year-old son's going to ride it. This is a picture of him when he was 11. I personally bring trash bags to the track, so there's no trash on the ground, there's no trash on the ice. I have a plow truck. I plow parking for people. I plow an ice skating rink for people. Also, when I go to Hoyt Road Marsh, I bring New Hampshire-made wicker snowshoes my mom used at Hoyt Road Marsh in the 70s. I bring those. I bring binoculars, sometimes a camera if I have film, because I don't know how to use the digital stuff. Just telling my story. There's been a little bit of talk about people being disrespectful. If you were to actually go hang out there, it's by far it's the opposite of that, where everyone's welcomed. We have hot chocolate, sometimes it's soup. Everyone's welcome. We don't care what your story is or who you are. You're welcome. We're not disrespectful to anyone. I have a 4th generation up and coming, and I actually put together my original motorcycle to ride there, and I was hoping this 3-year-old girl could ride it, and like her grandfather and her great-grandfather did. That may not happen. I'm hoping it will happen. I heard some people talking just in the foyer about night riding. I've been going there since the 80s. I've never seen anyone ride there at night. Never, ever, ever. That's not safe. Our bikes don't have lights. We're done by the time dark comes around anyway. We're tired, want to go home and get warm. Animals, it's kind of funny because I've integrated with quite a few animals there. Anything from a deer, snapping turtle, painted turtles, a lot of water snakes. I've handled water snakes, photographed them there. And we helped one year a baby deer off the southern shore that was stuck on super slippery ice. So, I mean, the wildlife thing I don't see is an impact from my standpoint. And it's kind of funny, when I snowshoe there, I don't recognize anybody opposing in this room that was opposing the bill. I've never seen any of them there snowshoeing in my life when there's no bikes there. And I'm an active snowshoer. So there's some pieces of the puzzle missing here. I don't get it. I've just never seen them there. So that's pretty much it. That's all I like to say. And I have a tad of social anxiety, so sorry about that.
Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks for having me, anyway.
Thank you.
If there's any questions, I can take it. I'm not that anxious. Nothing?
Senator Sherman, you have any questions?
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that hasn't had a chance to speak that would like to? All right, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 571.